All right, we're on air. It is May 25th, and this is a check-in meeting for development tasks for Backdrop CMS. On the agenda for today, first item is updates from the PMC. We're still working with the Software Freedom Conservancy's lawyer to get our agreement ironed out. He did send an email last week to everyone on the PMC via our shared email address, and I don't think anyone else has written back except for myself. So if you got that email, please reply to it just so he knows you're alive. And if you haven't gotten it, let me know so I can check the email address and make sure everyone's getting emails. So that would be one thing. But we're still moving forward on that pending everyone's agreement on language in that contract.
Do you want me to add a note there, Jen, about the Freedom Conservancy's rules around PMC members being in the same company?
What do you mean? Add it where?
Just to mention it. That Software Freedom Conservancy's current rules regarding fiscal sponsorship include that if a project is PMC managed, like ours is, that they don't allow multiple people from the same company to have multiple seats on the PMC. And so right now we actually have an issue in that Wes and I both work for Lullabot. And so according to their standard rules, that would not be allowed. However, it's not really a very large concern because internally, I filed an issue with PMC months and months ago that was basically prepping for me to step off of the PMC, but still maintain my committer role. And so this is basically just kind of going to accelerate those plans, or not really accelerate, but really just prompt them to finally happen. Just so that there's kind of like multiple conflicts going on there, but nothing to worry about. And as the details of that fully get published, and as I write up an explanation, everything like that, yeah, it'll be fully explained. But it's really not anything to be concerned about, but it's something that yeah, we'll be moving towards in the next couple of weeks.
Cool. That role makes a lot of sense to me, actually, and it's nice that we already had a plan in place. So that's sweet.
Yeah, although not for that reason.
Yeah, no. Very convenient.
Yeah, but I like it nonetheless. Yeah, for the same reasons, basically, just like overpowering the board or stacking the PMC with kind of like already aligned interests is yeah, it can make it so that you could overpower the PMC one way or the other, and it's the same idea in mind, basically, that they want to prevent that from happening.
Awesome. Cool.
Okay, back to you, Jen.
All right. So yeah, we're working on that. We'll get it figured out in the next few weeks, and then keep your eyes open for a post. I think it's going to be in the GitHub issue queue where the lawyer and the folks from Software Conservancy will be trying to reach out to the larger development community for Backdrop to make sure everybody knows that we're working on this and that everybody's in agreement that this is what they want. So it'll probably be in our primary GitHub issue queue where they'll just be kind of making an announcement. And if anyone has any questions about what this means, that would be your place to get them right from the horse's mouth and try and figure out, you know, any unanswered issues or any concerns, we can get those addressed. Okay, so other things we've been working on, we had a design meeting about an hour ago that Wes joined in, and he showed us some of the work he's been doing on the new homepage for backdropcms.org. He hasn't had a lot of time recently, but he's going to be working on that in the next week, and hopefully we'll have an update for us by next weekly meeting, which should be exciting. Backdrop CMS, Nate, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah. Before we go there, can I just say something?
Sure.
Yeah.
I wanted to do that when the video stream started, but yeah, here's the chance. Last week when we had the release, it weren't so many people like on the call, so it wasn't a big yay. 1.5 was released. Yay!
Wait, 1.7.
7, yes, sorry. But yeah, all that. Just that. I said it.
Okay.
Yay!
Yay! Yeah, we're excited too. Yeah, so 1.7 came out, and actually related to that, marketing-wise, well, and everything. So the way we normally handle releases is that after 2 weeks, we release a bug fix update, so 1.71. And the status of 1.71 is, at least according to what's in our issue tracker, I mean, there are a good, I don't know, like 20 issues or so in there, but none of them are like really substantially like critical.
And none of them were caused by 1.7.0 either, which is also exciting.
Yeah, they were all pre-existing issues that that we're just hoping to get handled as soon as possible. And so, nonetheless, though, we'll probably make 1.71 anyway, just because this is what we've done every release prior. Is after 2 weeks, we make a bug fix release, and at the same time, we update Pantheon, the Pantheon upstream for people that are using Backdrop on Pantheon, as well as we send out the newsletter announcing the official version. So
I don't think we've ever done that before, but I think that we should get in a habit of doing that every time, regardless.
done which part?
It was months before we came out with the first release after 1.6, the bug fix release.
Really?
Yeah, and that's why we have a 2 week milestone for 1.7.1, because we're like, we don't want that to happen again. Because it was like, we need to send a newsletter, but now it's old news. So
Wow.
it'd be good to do it.
My memory apparently is poor, but that's what I would like to do. Yeah.
So we have the newsletter written and already scheduled, so it'll go out regardless of whether we make a 1.7 release or not,
Okay.
unless we stop it. So
Well, still, at the same time, we definitely need to get the Pantheon upstream updated, because we want it so that if people are coming to our homepage and they click the, try Backdrop on Pantheon button, that should be running the latest version.
Yep.
Okay. So 1.71 issues, there's no items that I actually want to call out, although we can take a look at the issue tracker. There's only one issue in the RTBC queue. There's many more in the needs review queue. So as always, if we have the capacity to do some peer reviewing and get things moved from needs review status into RTBC, that will help speed things along. I guess I should also call out Jen and others have been doing some work on getting our cross ports from Drupal up to date. And that's a highly appreciated task that I'd love to see that moving forward towards RTB status as well. Since those are all they're very easy to move towards RTBC because it's really cross-porting existing fixes that have already been tested by the Drupal community. And actually, most of them are just like docs updates and things like that too. So lots of easy, low-hanging fruit in the queue for that.
Do we have a date scheduled for 1.7.1? A rough date, like maybe after next week?
Yeah, it would be, rough date would be...
The newsletter is going out on the 31st.
Okay, I would say let's target for the 30th. The 29th is Memorial Day in the United States, so it's a holiday. So that'll give us ample time to do some prep work, but I feel like we should do the release actually on a weekday, so we can follow that on Tuesday. And then the newsletter will come out the next day after that. So let's shoot for that. I'm gonna go ahead and type that in here. Okay. 1.8. Do we have any other questions on 1.7, actually, before I move on? No? Okay. 1.8. 1.8 is the next minor release of Backdrop. It'll be coming out September 15th, 2017. So we've got a good 4 months from now before our next release. As always, the code freeze will be on, feature freeze will be on September 1st. So we have a nice, glorious summer to make some progress in the next version of Backdrop.
Or winter.
Yeah, or winter if you're in Australia. Sorry, Gregory, and everyone in this other.
No, it will be. I will be Greece, so it will be summer for me. But yeah, just saying.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Okay, so items for 1.8 that we're thinking about. Some items from 1.7 that we had hoped to complete, but hadn't included layout relationships, which is issue 2134. The status of this is that it's kind of in a proof of concept state, but the concept is solid. The architectural underpinnings are there, and we really just need to figure out like if the implementation is acceptable and if the user interface is adequate. So that would be awesome. Media library, issue 1448. There's been a lot of excitement around this recently. We've had some new contributors come in and kind of roll together like a large amount of changes all at the same time. And now we're kind of working backwards and splitting those out into more granular issues so that we can make iterative progress one issue at a time. So I think at least some of that functionality is almost inevitable that will be completed. That includes some things. Let's see, this is the meta. Like being able to edit a file individually and replace it. The reusing files, like have some kind of media browser, has also been started, making views for finding images and reusing them. So there's lots of good work here. This issue is actually a meta 1448, and that the work is going on in different sub-issues underneath these. Yeah, and an item I added just this week is revisiting config translation, which is issue 704. I've been having some brainstorming thoughts on this, and I'll post an update to that issue after this call regarding how we can handle config translation in a largely backwards compatible manner that would make it so that we wouldn't need to wait until Backdrop 2 to implement it. And it would also be a really pretty simple approach where we would basically build config translation on top of locale module and run translations through T, but make it an official mechanism so that things like the translation extractor module, the POTX module, we could teach it tricks on how to read config files and pull out strings that need to be translated out of them, which that's the primary reason why you're not supposed to run T, like T on a variable, is because the POT extractor doesn't know what the value of that variable is. But if we make an official mechanism for translating values in config, then POT extractor can find those strings and things will be run through locale. And right now what we're doing is every time we have like a content type label or something like that, it's run through T right now. So basically we're doing what you're not supposed to be doing anyway. And that's the way it was for all of the 777 cycle. That things like content type labels are just run through locale module. So the idea basically is that we continue running things through locale module just as they were previously, but we add a mechanism for finding and locating strings through the config system. So it makes it so that our underlying translation system is the same as before, and we add additional APIs just to make it so that strings can be found by the extractor and pulled out of config, like without running T on a variable. Sorry, that was kind of a brain dump just for for one of our Hangouts, but I'm working on writing that all up. I think that's an interesting possibility. I'm not sure if that's actually 1.8 candidates really, but yeah, it's been circling around in my mind. So I'll put some efforts and energy into that, at least to get the ideas out there. 1.8, other items that we could potentially include in 1.8, kind of for soliciting ideas right now. We don't have a really strong focus for 1.8. It's probably going to be community driven, just where we find enthusiasm for particular issues, then that's probably kind of the direction in which we'll be heading.
There's going to be a lot of work involved on the media library stuff, and I would love to see, like, if we could put a focus on file management, media stuff. I think, you know, having that one feature might be huge, even if that was all we did for 1.8, might be a huge difference in terms of how people see Backdrop. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, and it would build nicely. 1.7 included some improvements to the rich text editor around images as well. And so, yeah, showing continuous improvement around the editing experience is definitely, it looks good on us. All right, well, you can find more issues that are slated for 1.8. Features that we're hoping to be completed, or work that has already been started, by checking out the 1.8 issue tracker, or the 1.8 milestone in GitHub issue tracker. And that's all I have for the 1.8 recap. We've started adding to these weekly agendas Backdrop 2.x discussions because we're moving towards that version number. And I think that we'd just like to discuss kind of what we're thinking about for Backdrop 2, which would be out like a year from now.
Well, January is when it's scheduled.
It's a little sooner than that then. I'm not really the best person to lead this conversation though. Jen or Jeff, do you want to?
Well, I just want to preface it a little bit by saying, like, if we do want to release a Backdrop 2 in January, we need to figure out what it means to be the next version of Backdrop. In particular, like whether we're going to break APIs or not. Because the way Drupal works, every major version breaks APIs. But now in Backdrop, we've been on Backdrop 1 for 3 years. We have a really good track record of like adding new features without breaking APIs. We could adopt a slightly different model than Drupal, where if we move to something more like Symfony, where we decided to have 2 major versions that didn't break APIs, then we could do something like in Backdrop 3, drop support for Backdrop 1, and it would give our entire community more time to kind of get all of those contrib projects up to date before they need to worry about breaks. And it would also give us a good opportunity to show the Backdrop community that we're committed to making upgrades from 1 to 2 easy and from 2 to 3 easy, and which is kind of something that we're working on as well. So I think like that, if we just wanted to release Backdrop 2 with only support for 2 major versions of core, that's still going to be a significant amount of work. And we're going to need to figure out how we can get from Backdrop 1 to Backdrop 2 still supporting those modules in the amount of time that we have left. So then that's kind of one question. And then the other question is like, what do you get for upgrading to Backdrop 2? And that I think is the discussion that Jeff's added a bunch of stuff into the agenda here about, like, you know, it would be great if we had a killer feature. It would be great if we had something that would benefit existing sites, but like, what is that going to be? So Jeff, I want to turn it over to you so you can talk a little bit about your ideas here too.
Yeah, the basic idea is to, I think it was phrased as upgrade to WordPress. I think that might be a little strong, but a way to get content from WordPress sites to backdrop sites. So my main concept of it was to kind of replicate the ease of getting content in and out of WordPress in backdrop. And then once we have that, we can build on top of that to get content from other sources that aren't backdrop, like WordPress and or Drupal.
Yeah, I wonder for most of these ideas, at least that are in the 2.x checklist, most of them have to do with features, you know, things that we could add that aren't necessarily blocked on 2.x. It's just a matter of, you know, if we want to bundle them in 2.x for, you know, kind of marketing purposes or something like that, because there's nothing preventing us from implementing most of these things in the 1.x cycle.
Right, but if Backdrop 1 and Backdrop 2 are API compatible, then that would be at any time between now and Backdrop 3.
The only thing that I want to add as a major, I don't know if you can call it a feature, and I don't know how many APIs we need to break in order to do that, is multilingual, like everything, menus, everything. And I don't know, it's a big task. I don't know if we have enough time for two, but I would like the next major version to be more, and it's great that Olaf just mentioned something. Yes, this is something that we lack in comparison with Drupal, the way that it is Drupal 8 now, because it's multilingual from its core, like in its core.
Yeah, we do have a bunch of items slated for, I mean, in the 2.x milestone, because as we encounter things that require API changes, basically, like we put them into the 2.x milestone. But almost all of these things are not really so much features, so much as they're just like cruft, basically, that we could remove.
Well, some things too, like we initially start saying, oh, that's really hard. That should be like a 2.x feature. And then we talk about it for a while and we come up with significant changes that we can do without breaking APIs. And then we have like a follow-up issue that's like, oh, we might need to break APIs to do that. And something like menu translation might be something we can fix without breaking APIs, especially if we get some significant improvements to translation in general, like the kind of stuff Nate's talking about. There might be ways we can fit things together. So yeah, I'm not sure how much of any of these things need to do for a 2.x release, or like how much API breaks we need.
Yeah, menu translation is an item that actually there's already a pull request and a branch for doing that work that is actually totally functional and does it in a backwards compatible manner. So yeah, again, like, you know, most of these things we could probably handle without 2.x. I also kind of wonder, you know, if we're talking about removing layers of functionality or cruft, I'm not really sure if come January, if the time would be appropriate for us to do things like, you know, remove the Drupal compatibility layer, right? That's on by default in every backdrop installation. And the purpose was to make it so that you could port modules more easily from Drupal. And I think
sites too.
Yeah, and I think that actually it's done a fairly good job of doing that. Like you can port modules, a lot of modules, very, very simply, you know, with just a few updates to the .info file. But that's not really, you know, how you should be leaving your modules. It takes quite a bit more work to get them to be totally backdrop compatible. And so I think it's time for us to evaluate if that ease of transition is, you know, if its benefit has been spent, you know, and if we should be removing that kind of backwards compatibility layer?
I would say probably not, based on the number. Like, I'm still moving Drupal 6 sites to Backdrop. I would say there's probably a ton of Drupal 7 sites that are still ready or haven't been moved yet and still would. But what might be a good halfway step is, like, in Backdrop 2, rather than having it set to enabled by default, we set it to disabled by default. And then in Backdrop 3, we could remove it if the time is right then. And that might be a nice way to, like, incrementally step closer to that goal without removing a feature that a ton of people might still be using.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I was playing devil's advocate there. That I still think it's providing a value as well.
Yeah, I was gonna chime in. This is Jack, and say I agree about retaining backwards compatibility for a little bit longer. Just there are so many folks, I think, right about now realizing, like, there's a new wave of folks realizing that Drupal 8 is not so ready for many sites, and I think there's going to be continued waves of interest in good alternatives. So I feel like continuing to have the Drupal 6 and Drupal 7 easy pathway is pretty important for a while.
Yeah, I think that too as well. Maybe when we reach version 3, I think that the way that Drupal 8 has handled that is the way to go. They more or less said that Drupal 9 is not going to be a major breaking version, so it will be easier to move from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9, and then 10 will be the API breaking one. I think that we should follow the same path more or less.
Yeah, in which case Backdrop 2 would be primarily removing all of our deprecated functions, for example. And removing, like we have some menu callbacks, and like we've done so much rearranging mid-cycle in 1.x that we've got dozens of paths that are redirects from one location to the other. And we could do things like finally get rid of the word people. I know it's one of Jen's favorites. Get rid of the word people from the account management screens and URLs and things like that. Because you're not managing people, you're managing their accounts, right? And so things like that would actually end up being like a really, really minor set of functionality. And whatever functionality would have in 2.x might just be, no more than we would have in any other minor version, just a tiny increment of functionality rather than giant swaths of new code.
Works for WordPress.
Yeah, that's what WordPress does. But WordPress actually never breaks compatibility, so they say. So, like in 2.0, they don't even break compatibility from like 1.9 and so on.
I saw what Jeff just said, and I think it's not a matter of voting. It's just a matter of having enough time. Even if we vote on whether we're going to have it in Jan 15, like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think like having a PMC consensus on whether this is a good idea or not is good. But then we also need to have like a technical follow-up to be like, is it possible? And I think that if what we're looking for is removing deprecated functions and changing the way the module system works to support 2 major versions, that might be possible. But if we're also looking at removing database abstraction layer or something crazy, that might not be possible. So I think like knowing the scope ahead of time is gonna influence our ability to make the technical decision too. So I don't know when the PMC vote needs to happen. Like if we need to do the due diligence research ahead of time and say, just so you know, this is not possible. Okay, now vote on another alternative. Or if we need to say like, we're gonna do it, and then we look at it and we go back and say, oh no, we can't do it. We'll do something else. But I also think it's good to have these conversations with people outside the PMC too, just so that we get an idea of like, anyone who's watching this video might have some really valuable feedback on like, oh, I've got 20 Backdrop sites, please don't break my APIs, or, whatever it is. It'd be good to get there, at least have those people have the option to weigh in before we go to a PMC vote.
Yeah, and if things come down to it, there's always the option of us Like if we're not technically ready for a 2.x and the infrastructure changes that would require and process changes that would require, we do have the option of going to like backdrop 110 and then 111 and 112.
Which I think personally is just fine.
Yeah, because obviously Drupal is at what, 7.55 or whatever. Like the infrastructure is there to support more than 9 or 10 minor versions. So
yeah, and I really appreciate that folks are talking about this, like kind of not being beholden to the calendar for it. You know, like for the technical reasons and also for reasons that go towards our mission more, these kind of concerns about staying ready for all the people still getting off of Drupal 6 and realizing that their options are not what they thought they would be. That's really part of our mission. So it makes sense. Yeah.
There's one particular feature I would like to mention because I'm not sure if it would be breaking API, but I would like to see it as an option. See, up to now I was just working with Drupal and Backdrop as a hobby mostly, but now working in an agency that for an agency that does government jobs, there's a one particular problem with Drupal that comes up every now and then, more often than it should. See how when you upload one file and people are thinking that this will replace with the same file name, and they're thinking that it will replace an existing file, but then an underscore 0 underscore 1 gets appended to the file name. And there is a module, there is a module that handles that case for Drupal 7, but it's not ready for Drupal 8. Anyways, this problem just keeps coming up, and I'm not sure if this would be handling these cases would be an API breaking change, or we can make it an option, like in the file system, and say how you want to be handling new uploads. Should they be renamed or whatever? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I'll also run into that issue really commonly. It's not related to government sites. Anyone, like from an end user experience, when you replace a file and you upload a file with a name, you expect the new file to have the name that you gave it. There's a great Drupal 7 module. I think that we could implement parts of that in core without an API break. I also think we could do it anytime. Like we could do it in 7.1 if you were upset about it enough. I'm pretty upset about it. We can work on it together and get that done. There we go.
It's like, this subject is being brought up like very often, and it's like I guess what people expect. But on one hand, people that are happy with how Drupal works now, they will, if we change it and don't make that optional, will be disappointed. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people, I guess like 50-50 thing, that expect Drupal to be behaving like a file manager. So when I upload something, I just want it to have that name.
Yeah.
So I don't want to change that. I want you to change the old names or something like that. And that's what that module used to do for Drupal 7.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if this would be a 2.0 material, or we can do something sooner.
I mean, I think what we do is we have a setting just like you recommended. And for all old sites, we set the setting to remain the way it is now. And then for new sites, we set it the way people expect it to be. And then if people want to change their old sites, they go change the setting. But yeah, I don't think that that's it wouldn't require API breaks. Does anyone else have any other thoughts about Backdrop 2? Okay, well, let's keep talking about it. I'm curious to see what's required in core, in Backdrop core, to support 2 major versions of contrib modules. I'm happy to look into that. I do not know what's required on our infrastructure side in terms of project module or backdropcms.org to support 2 major versions of contrib projects at one time. But we'll have to look into that too.
Yeah, I'm sure it's quite a bit. Update module too.
Yeah.
And backdropcms.org, which see how Drupal, they have some switches in, like for setting modules, the compatibility of the versions, like drop-down menus, and api.backdropcms.org.
Yep. Okay. Well, let's see. What else is on our agenda? Event recap. So was it 3 weeks ago now? CivicCon happened this year, and there was a huge flurry of activity around Backdrop during and after CivicCon. So Jack, you know the most about CivicCon. Do you want to give us an update on how that went?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, honestly, I don't have tons of details, just what my coworkers Morgan and Joseph came back with. So CivicCon had pretty good attendance this year, though it was down a little bit. So I think folks in the community are going to try to get it to be a little bit more robust again. So that's kind of like a general CivicCon thing. And I think some new folks are excited about getting involved with the community there around that stuff. And I know that my coworkers and maybe folks from another shop, Open Flows, also talked up Backdrop while they were there. And I think that's what helped push the Backdrop official release of CivicCRM. So CivicCRM stable is out. It's on the download page. It's ready for showtime. I've been testing it quite a bit on the site that we're about to make live, the Backdrop site that's going live, I think finally in June, that we're using, and it's going great. So I think folks were pretty excited about that. It was a sharp contrast to what I heard about the presentation on Drupal 8, where it was demonstrated that CivicCRM can be turned on, but once you do that, you can't enable any other modules in Drupal 8. So we're a lot further ahead. Not that it's all about that, but it was news to a lot of people at CivicCon, and that's specifically a big nonprofit audience and folks working in education and stuff like that. So I think it put Backdrop a little bit more on folks' radar after that, and that's why that flurry came up, because the interest is there. I definitely saw a number of nonprofits come back from that, because CivicCon is something that users actually go to, which is interesting. Like a lot of users go. There's a user summit, there's trainings and stuff like that. So many of Valante's clients were actually there. And so they get directly this news about what's going on in Drupal and in WordPress and in Backdrop now too. So yeah. I guess for those reasons, I would definitely encourage folks to try to make it out, or for us to do some more recruitment, maybe, of folks who are doing the Civi and Backdrop thing. Like, Herb has been doing a lot of stuff, Herb Duel, I believe, and did a lot of work to get the Civi release for Backdrop out. So might be worthwhile to get in touch with folks about, I don't know, more Backdrop representation in that community. So, yeah.
That'd be great.
Cool. I'd be down to reach out to Herb at some point after I catch up on, I have to get web form CivicCRM fully released, and then I can ask other people to to do other work. So now that Civi's out, I got to do it. So yeah.
I did also ask Herb if he would do a blog post on Civi and Backdrop, and he said he would, but he had some bug he was trying to fix first, which seemed more than fair to me.
Awesome. That's cool. Thank you for reaching out. Yeah. Cool.
All right. Is there anything else anyone wants to talk about this week?
Sure. I did put something in about, it was on the meta for 2, and I don't know if we want to hold off till 2 or if it's something that you're even interested in, but it had to do with pre-populating a site when people download with content. It seemed like a few people there said, yeah, it'd be a good idea, because I guess for some novices coming in downloading Backdrop for the first time, they might not see the potential with a vanilla site, even though there are posts and there are pages and there are some samples in the download. I don't know if others have an interest in that, but I know when I downloaded other CMSs when I was first looking a long time ago, and then I revisited, there seemed to be some content creators that just fill in with samples just so that people could see. I don't know if that's a discussion worth having here, or if we want to keep it in the issue queue.
Yeah, I mean, this is a long-standing problem with Drupal too, is that when you first install a Drupal site, you get a blank slate, and it's really hard for people to visualize like how this blank slate relates to their finished product website. And we, in the version of Backdrop, have now included one page and one post, which is better than nothing, but it still doesn't communicate like the power of a content management system. I think we're a little torn between the amount of work somebody would have to do to actually build their own site with like deleting all the stuff they don't want versus the amount of benefit it does to have all of that content there for new people. So I don't know like where that option might be. It looks like everybody in the chat is talking about Develop Generate. We already have a tool in a developer module to develop content, but that's kind of the opposite of what we want, right? Like we want Develop Generate to delete all of your content, and we want Backdrop to ship all of your content. So the developers have the work to do and not the end users. So I guess we would I think, Tom, it's a great idea. We need to have more of a conversation about how to get the content in, what the content should be. Like if you install a module, should it automatically, that provides like a content type, should it automatically create content of that type? Is there going to be like an easy off button? So if you're a developer and you do want to start with a blank slate, you can, disable auto content and then turn on module, and then there won't be any content. I think just like we need a little thought about how it'll work. I think it's a good idea.
Well, thanks. So the one I saw was almost in the opposite fashion that I thought would work, that I liked, and that was where the default was just the vanilla download. This is what you get. But if you downloaded it and then wanted to see more, then there was a populate content button that brought in a bunch of sample content. So it was not an afterthought, but if there wasn't enough there for you to begin with and you're just perusing CMSs, there was a possibility to do that, but it didn't come in with the default installed. It was something that a novice could then add to, and it populated a bunch of crap. So you really had more there than what you would want. So you probably end up deleting that installing a vanilla, but at least after the very first time you didn't download it, look at it and go, I don't know what it does, and delete it. And that's the end of your interest.
Yeah. So I was actually thinking, so just this week I was setting up a Backdrop site for one of its new owners to maintain themselves. And I set up like backup and migrate module and turned on the, access to the automatic updater. And I was thinking like, it might be a good idea to put something like backup and migrate in core so that people just have that ability to like do automated backups. And if we had something like that in core, we could give them a button that would essentially like restore a database that might have a ton of content in it. Yeah. And then we'll also have the ability to revert back to the clean slate version. So that might be like two features that would go in hand is like one, give you this backup and migrate tool, but two, also build in a feature that we could like ship backup and migrate with some empty, empty database versus just a database with content in it. And then when you go push the button that says show me sample content, it would make a backup of your empty database, install the other one. And then when you're like, okay, I've seen what I want, give me back my empty site, you can hit revert and it would switch it back. One thing backup and migrate doesn't handle right now is config. So we would need to figure out how to back up your config in addition to your database. But I think that's fairly trivial in terms of like the utility that would provide, and it might solve both those problems. So I love this idea. I love thinking about like what we would need to figure out is the user interface that would prompt someone from the blank slate to get to the show me content version. Like we need to put it somewhere they don't have to find it or it's not going to be effective.
I read both the posts for the 2.0 version and Tom's suggestion for that. And I wanted to chime in, but I didn't have the time. Just a few thoughts. Feeds module, how it works is it allows you to input from, say, a CSV file. And then if you do not like the import, from the importer page, it allows you to delete imported content, just the imported content. So it keeps track of what it has imported, and it allows you to revert, not to revert, to delete, because if you have set it to override things, it will still delete them, which might be considered data loss. So that was one thought. And then what you are talking about, Tom, just brought back the memories of I think that there's an issue in the queue about permitting profiles to run even after installation.
Yeah.
So we should take another thought, because what you suggest there is like we can't have a single sort of like type of bulk content that will please everybody. So I think the solution there is a variety of like sites that would be profiles, and then allowing people to browse from the project browser and install like a blog site, a demo blog site. Because the Vel generate is good, but it just generates lorem ipsum things. It doesn't, like, it's not an actual pretty thing. It's just a development tool.
Gotcha.
Whereas, yeah,
Well, and this is going to be a conversation that goes on. I just want to get a feeling to see if anybody was opposed to it, or if it was something that we would feel like, from a marketing standpoint, it really would help novices. I remember for the first couple of years I was playing Drupal and going to DrupalCons, and they would show all the wonderful things it could do on a vanilla blue background, and I'd look at my partner and go, what? I mean, it took several years, and we were invested in it at that point, and I didn't see the magic. So now I can. This is 7 years later. But if we're trying to pick up people with that first impression, the one CMS that I downloaded, I was like, well, there it is. I can see it.
Yeah.
So,
as Jen said, we've done baby steps on improving the situation, and I think it's a good thing that we now have a this is your first page, just edit it. That's a really cool thing, and we have a couple of menus there. I would love it if there were more menus to showcase the drop down out of the box, for example. But with just 2 pages, it just seems redundant. But yeah, this needs a lot of conversation, and I think that, see how we have as projects modules, themes, and layouts. I think that there should be another level for profiles, and allow them to be executed post installation, and then people can start creating their blog profile or their I don't know, Yellow Pages profile, and build on top of that. Because I bet that no one's going to be happy with what we'll put in core, and it's like they're going to start saying, oh, we think it should be this or be that. So it will be a lot of bike shading. That was my main point.
well, it's a conversation we can continue. I just want to make sure I wasn't bringing up something that there wasn't an interest in.
No, it's very. I would like to see that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Anything else we should talk about? All right. Well, we had a nice long meeting this week. I think that's good. We've got hard things to talk about. But let's go ahead and wrap this meeting. We can continue these conversations in the issue queue and in Gitter, and we will see everyone next week.
All right, sounds good.
Take care,
Bye,
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.